Hello everybody, welcome. I'm No02 and thank you for watching this video. We are going to be going over Trials of the Worm, obtaining the knowledge. This is going to be, not about uh, team compositions or a good deck or playing with random people. We'll get to that later. Here we're going to be focusing on fully understanding what these four modifiers are doing as far as how they're impacting our overall gameplay. Please be sure to check the timestamps because we'll be going over the modifiers in general, going through them specifically one by one, talking about what they all do and how they affect us. We'll also show you some setups where we can min-max essentially how much multiplier we have for the least amount of difficulty or sort of challenge in it. Then we'll go over some nuances of Trials of the Worm, how the way it's structured, how it works, how it sort of interacts with certain things and certain concepts that only exist in Trials of the Worm, and how we can sort of fully understand them. And finally, we'll be going over some cards that are weaker or stronger because of Trials of the Worm. So, first off, let's fully understand just like the general gist of this all. You increase these modifiers, you push the buttons, and the game gets harder. But I want to point out here, the top left, you can see here that difficulty, when completely maxed out, we've clicked it 15 times. We have a final multiplier of 21. Now, when we have maxed out Ridden, we have a final multiplier of 11. The same is true of the Horde. The same is true of players. And so, just notably, we can recognize that increasing difficulty overall provides us with more multiplier than the other three ranks or the other three modifiers individually. Not only that, I want to point out that if we were to have Ridden completely maxed out, one of these smaller three, the end result is a modifier of 11, and that's 15 clicks, right? That's 15 ranks that we've chosen and put into one category. Notice here if we split it, if we do 14 clicks in one and then one rank in another, right? We still 15 clicks, right? 5 times 3, right? We still clicked it 15 times. We still have 15 points in the modifiers, but we have 9.6 as our total end here. And the point that I'm making here is that as you put more points into a single category, you are rewarded more. The amount of multiplier that you get scales up as you put those points or funnel those points into one section. And so, with that sense of logic, it would behoove us to, if you're going to increase the difficulty, you might as well just keep putting it into the same category until it's maxed out. That's the sort of the most bang for your buck potentially, as far as increasing your rank or increasing the rank of the modifiers while increasing your multiplier at the same time. Now, we will begin with the difficulty modifier. And as we all sort of know, these are the basic metrics that we've always sort of measured the game with, or the game devs have measured towards us, showed us. Right? We got no bonus stats. This trauma resistance is lowest. We got Ridden strength, dangerous. Event difficulty, very hard. Extra life, 0. Friendly fire, blah, blah, blah. We know that you don't typically respawn in no hope mode if you were to go down or be killed. So, same thing in legendary mode, and you have one roaming boss. And for the most part, this is all the same things of no hope mode, but very abstractly. Instead of saying Ridden strength dangerous and legendary, uh, I think in no hope mode it says Ridden strength like very high or something like that. What this is actually doing is basically just when you take damage, you're going to receive trauma, guaranteed no matter what, and it's the most that you can possibly gain as far as the numbers are concerned. Secondly, Ridden strength, dangerous, that means they have more health and they deal more damage. And that's it. That's it. That's about it as far as the difference between legendary and no hope mode. Event difficulty is like how many crates do you need to carry to the truck in T5? How many shells do you need to fire out of the cannon at the end of Act 1 in the Sound of Thunder? Right, how many windows do you need to board up in Hell's Bells? Those are the event difficulties. Those numbers are typically as high as they can be in legendary mode. I haven't specifically tested out if there's a difference between legendary mode and no hope mode when it comes to like boarding up the windows in the library or the Hell's Bells and things like that. For the most part, though, it's just harder. And really, the big thing though with difficulty, the big impact that you're going to feel is just more health and more damage on the Ridden. Getting smashed by a tall boy pretty much kills you in no hope mode. In legendary mode, it pretty much kills you just the same, right? So it's really just more health, more damage, and that's really what you're going to be feeling impact wise when it comes to playing on the max difficulty here. Next, we'll check out Ridden. Now, there's a lot more going on here, but ultimately, we can summarize this as enemies have more health and they deal more damage. It's pretty much the same thing as difficulty is concerned as well. All right, so Ridden deal 30% bonus damage, 50% mutation melee speed. Attacks from the common slow you. They already slow you down when they punch you. This is even more so. An extra 30% is it's feelable. It's feelable for sure. Basically, though, the effect is the same. Right now, if you were to run and a zombie were to punch you, it significantly lowers your movement speed down to the point that like you have to deal with the zombie. You can't usually get away from them in most cases. Now with this, you absolutely can't. You have to stop and deal with the zombie and get clear before you can keep moving. Common Ridden regenerate health 3. I don't know if this is per second or if it's every 5 seconds. I don't know what the how much health this is and when it's how often it's ticking. I'm going to assume it's I don't know 45 health points of health a second. The mutation health regen, not entirely sure. I think if you're probably more familiar with like playing swarm mode, because I think some of the mutations could get health regen, probably similar to that, but in PvE. Fire resistance, explosive resistance. So again, for the most part, the common, the zombies, the Ridden, they deal more damage and they're more durable. Health regen and explosive resistance. We'll talk about this a little bit more when we get into the cards that are weaker, but in general, like grenades for the most part, if you invest a little bit into them, will still one shot, will still blow up most of the mutations, but like the tall boy variants, especially the hardened tall boy, they're even more durable. So it's like essentially it's like more the same as far as like the hardened tall boy that was already really hard to kill with grenades. They're even harder now to kill with grenades, and but all the other mutations like the Reeker and the Stinger variants, a good grenade throw will still just blow them up all the same. So this actually ends up feeling exactly the same in almost all of the instances. But in theory, it's more durability. We are going to come back to Max Corruption card here. Oh, I forgot to zoom in on this. You can see this crap better now. Sorry. We're going to come back to this. We have to talk about this a little bit extensively because there's some nuances here. A mutation recover from stumble faster. So if you stumble them by knocking off an armor plate from them or do enough damage to stumble them that they just recover faster. Common attacks remove max health. This is sort of interesting. This is in addition to trauma. I haven't done a tremendous amount of testing with this, but as far as I can tell, a common zombie punches you in the face, you lose health, you take a certain amount of trauma, and then also too your max health shrinks a little bit. Shrinks a little. So you can recover that trauma, but you can never recover that max health until the end of the mission. As far as I can tell, this max health removal resets from mission to mission in the trials. What's also notable about this is that when I was playing around with this or playing through trials in general, it felt like sometimes I was healing in between missions, and that's not how it's supposed to work. I thought it was maybe a bug. It's actually this, as far as I can tell. Remember when you had that? What was that bug with the? There was a bug. I can't remember what the card calls now. Oh no, there was a bug when you heal yourself or a teammate with a medical accessory, it would give them bonus maximum health for the rest of that level. And then it would reset or go away going into the next mission. There was a bug where that maximum health, when it was removed, would restore that much trauma going into the mission. As far as I can tell, this is doing something similar to that where you will have missing health, you'll have a bunch of trauma, and then you can go into the next mission and you will recover some of that health and you will recover some of that trauma. So as far as I can tell, and I don't want to like say it definitively, but pay attention to this maybe that to some extent this loss of max health might be beneficial in the long run because it might be healing or recovering trauma for us when we go mission to mission. Mutation weak spot bonus removed. I don't know if weapons have a bonus modifier themselves, but for the most part, this comes down to this more durability, right? We can evaluate this as shooting a weak spot versus a mutation is less valuable. It's less valuable. And if weapons don't have a weak spot modifier all of their own, then that would mean shooting a mutation's weak spot becomes pointless unless you're running a card that increases your weak spot damage. So keep that in mind that sometimes it may be better just to land clear, concise shots instead of missing a couple because you're trying to hit a weak spot because those bullets may not be doing bonus damage. But ultimately, we sum that up as mutations are more durable. And headshots only on common. This is sort of one that you get right at the end, like the second to last, I think, rank in Ridden gives you the headshots only on common. Not the worst thing in the world because most of the time you should be trying to get headshots in the common anyways. It's the ammo, it drops them faster, it's better for crowd control. I do need a note though that you can still penetrate, your bullets still penetrate through the zombies, even though you may not be dealing damage with them. So if you got a zombie running at you and you're shooting him in the chest, zombies behind them will still take bullets as well. So you can like shoot a zombie in the chest and the zombie behind him. If you shoot him in the head, it deals damage. Also, too, you can still like sort of stumble the zombie by shooting them with a bullet. You'll sort of see like there's it's like a recovery time for them and with like a measure of like immunity to it. But you can still like shoot zombies and they'll sort of like still stagger a little bit. But overall, like this is just sort of like a big inconvenience. Really, the better you get at the game, the more often you're getting headshots, anyways. But this is one that sort of like makes dealing with horde events rather chaotic and kind of crazy. But overall, this makes the Ridden more difficult. Now we need to talk about max corruption card difficulty. When you're choosing a mission in Trials of the Worm, it'll have the mission, and then next to it is a bunch of corruption cards. Bad things like you can't use the vendor for this mission or for the rest of the trial. And here's the mutation, and this is the corruption card for the tall boy, and you can see that it's hardened and things like that. This max, I don't know what it means. I don't know what it means. Now, granted, we can say that if you increase the Ridden difficulty, let's say we went into a trial looking exactly like this, you would get corruption cards that are above average, more difficult than what would be in recruit mode, right? Because we're in recruit mode with max Ridden here. And so overall, the corruption cards are more dangerous. But this max does not reflect the maximum difficulty of a card of a card or of the possibilities that a card could have. What I mean by that is I did some testing and some experimenting, and you can run max Ridden difficulty, right, for max corruption difficulty, but you'll still get the lower difficulty versions of certain corruption cards, even though it says max. For example, you can get the corruption card that says your vendor is closed for the rest of the trial. And that is the most difficult variation of the vendor corruption card that you can get. But even though we're running max Ridden here, you can still get the corruption card that says your vendor is closed for this mission. It'll be open on the next one. So this max doesn't relate, as far as I can tell, to the maximum level that a corruption card could have. It seems like if you want to face that more often, you actually need to have maximum difficulty and maximum Ridden in order to always get the maximum difficulty of the corruption card variation. The other thing too, max does not pertain to quantity. This is not running this right here will not give you the maximum amount of potential cards here. What ends up doing that, as we'll see in the Horde category for modifiers, is that there is a variation increase. +4 mutant variations, and that is reflected by having +4 additional corruption cards in all of the missions that you're choosing from, and then those corruption cards will relate to a particular mutation, and that mutation will spawn more regularly in your mission. And so right here, this max corruption card difficulty, I honestly don't fully understand what it's really doing other than that it is bumping up the average difficulty of all your corruption cards, regardless of what your difficulty and regardless of what your horde is. But it's not actually max. The point that I'm trying to make. This is a little notable thing here that this max corruption card difficulty is not as scary as it could be. It gets scary when you max out horde and or difficulty in conjunction with the Ridden thing. But it feels like in a sense, the Horde being maxed out or the difficulty being maxed out seems to have a greater impact on what your corruption cards end up being than like this actual max corruption card difficulty thing says. I don't really fully understand it. So, Horde maxed out. Plus 20 common per Horde. I don't fully understand how this works. As far as I can tell, the Horde events don't really last longer when you have this bumped up all the way to the end. We do know that the game can only support so many enemies on the map at a time. If there was an unlimited number, the game would crash eventually, right? Or people's PCs would take serious taxes on things like that. So I don't know if this means that they raised the overall amount of enemies that can exist on the map at a time, increase the spawn rate of them. I will say though that max Horde, the Horde events do feel more chaotic. But are there actually 20 more enemies being spawned? Is it being spawned over, an additional 5 seconds that's been snuck into the Horde timer duration, or enemies are spawning faster or more frequently? I don't fully understand or know. But to some extent, the Horde events do feel a little more chaotic. And so perhaps that's from the plus 20 common per Horde. But, I mean, when it comes to dealing with a Horde event, you stand in the right place and the Horde event's not an issue. An extra 20 bad guys is not a problem so long as you're in a good position. And if you're in a bad position, you're not going to feel the difference between this plus 20 or not, right? Because it's just chaos either way. The plus 4 variations means that there's just 4 more enemies that are going to be commonly spawning in the map. There's always an opportunity for all of the enemies to spawn to some degree in any given mission. But when you go through a mission, whether it's in trials or a normal campaign, you get a couple of corruption cards that pertain to a mutation. Those always end up being the mutations that you fight most regularly. So it's possible to get other mutations, like the other mechanic spawn mutations or whatever. Max hazard density, I don't know what this means. Don't know what this means. I try to play around with it. I don't fully understand if it means that more gas can spawn. If whatever, more cars are more dangerous when they explode. I'm not entirely sure what this means. If this means more bear traps, more duster traps, more sleepers, I really couldn't tell the difference. And the same thing with the Ridden corruption card thing being sort of linked to the other categories. If this max hazard density is related to like the amount of sleepers that spawn and things like that, it does seem like it's tied to difficulty again. Where if you want to have a lot of sleepers spawn, you need to have higher difficulty and high horde because it's like I don't know. You don't play through recruit and then like have sleepers everywhere, even with the horde button clicked all the way up. I don't fully understand what the hazard density is actually doing. Plus 3 common variants works the same exact way that the mutation variants work. These you'll have an additional 3 corruption cards that pertain to the zombie variant. So it's like the explodey head, the fire, the goopy acid zombies, the SWAT zombie with the helmet that comes off with 1 bullet, and like the military zombie and their helmet has like an actual health pool. Things like that. So it's just more corruption cards, giving more variation. This is way more feelable in a lot of ways than I think the mutation spawns, because the mutation spawns are pretty limited as far as like timers and numbers that are happening in the background. But as you're going through the map, you'll just see, you'll come to a new area and there's a bunch of zombies wandering around. You'll clearly see that there's a lot of variation, that there's like, the spice of life, right? A little bit going on all over the place. Extra health for the boss, max boss stun resistance. I don't know if this is different than like, mutations are stumbled for less, but again, this word max, like all of the things that say max, very vague, not very understandable. I don't know exactly what this is meaning. I don't know how it's quantified in any way, but we can assume that if you throw a stun grenade at a hag or a ogre or whatever, a breaker, they get stunned for less. The stun is shorter, and you can do the math yourself if you want to test it out. Monstrous bosses. So when it comes to the roaming bosses, they're always higher level. Or if you get a corruption card that has a boss, it's monstrous and things like that. So basically, just the overall difficulty of the boss that you encounter is always going to be monstrous once this is clicked on. And then an additional chance for a roaming boss. Notice chance. Sometimes you go through a mission if you're on legendary mode and you have this cranked up, sometimes you'll fight 2 bosses or even 3 bosses, given like the level where like there's a boss spawn in the level like Tunnels of Blood, and then you get a boss, and then you can get another boss because you got both of your roaming bosses triggered at the same time. Um, I I don't know if I've ever fought 2 bosses at once. Like I don't know if I've ever encountered both roaming bosses at once. I don't know if it's possible or not. It might be possible. I hope it is. That might be kind of fun to like fight 2 breakers in the middle of some random map. You know, just fighting 2 breakers in the middle of whatever, like a random room in the middle of Tunnels of Blood or something like that. So what Horde is ultimately doing, it's really the most impact you're going to feel is the variations and the boss and like the boss health and things like that, right? It's basically a larger variety of enemies, which can be annoying. That pretty much means, right, there's only 5 types of common ridden, and we have +3 plus whatever the difficulty normally adds on. For the most part, every single mission, you're seeing all of the different types of zombies, and you're seeing just about all of the different types of mutations. I know there's more, whatever 7 or 4 or whatever, right? But for the most part, you're just encountering all of the enemies all the time. And then bosses overall are more difficult. And now player. This is like the quality of life stuff, right? Minus ammo capacity, increased vendor price, loss of sprint efficiency, movement speed while firing is gone, environmental damage taken. I'm assuming that this is gas cans, cars, blah blah blah. Maybe sleepers do more damage with this, I don't know. But basically if a car blows up, it killed you. And now if you have this on and a car blows up, it kills you, right? So not a whole lot of difference here. 40% chance to spawn broken items. We are going to come back to this. This is going to lead us into the cards and really big element here. +3 fabulous mementos. Getting a memento increases your overall score for that particular mission. And this is really important to talk about in just terms of bang for our buck, right? These 3 categories give us a maximum of +10 multiplier when they're totally maxed out. But because player gives us the additional spawns of mementos, when it comes to increasing our overall difficulty, player is the most bang for our buck, or increasing our overall chance for score. Player is the most bang for our buck because it not only gives us bonus multiplier, it also gives us the opportunity to loot more mementos for more score. And so I would say if you're going to look for opportunities to squeeze out more points to get a high score, you have to do player. Get used to playing with the player modifier all the way cranked up because it's going to be one of the quickest and easiest ways to increase your score overall. So if you had to choose one to sort of like practice and get used to, it's player, and it's because of the fabulous mementos. -2 extra team lives. For the most part, that's not an issue because if you're playing on the highest difficulty, then you already don't have extra lives to begin with. No friendly cleaner outlines. This is like realism mode in Left 4 Dead 2, where if you and a teammate get behind a wall, you can't see them. So if you get too far ahead and your teammates are in rooms or somewhere else, you literally can't see where they are. Teammates shrouded, or teammate status is shrouded. This is the thing that everyone thought like was a bug, that like the cloud wasn't downloading correctly, but it's because of the fog on the maps. You can't see your teammate status. You can't see their health bar. You can't see what items they're carrying or not, and you can't see if they're pinned or anything like that. But I do think there's still an audio cue of somebody like, "Oh God, help me!" But you can't see visually on your screen anymore like you could before. And then all accessory slots -1. This is kind of a big one in a sense where, um, one, if you're playing in the highest difficulties, you don't really want to stop and loot anyways. You need to go, go, go. And so if you're going to be the support player, you're typically already investing into extra slots. But this is actually a really big nerf for medics, for support characters, because one way that you can sort of get away with having really good decks as a support character is that you don't need to run inventory. You don't need to run extra pockets for your support slot, because if you're the dedicated team medic, your teammates also have a support slot, and they just drop it on the ground, and then you pick it up, and then you heal them with it. That's the most efficient way to mid max somebody who's running a support deck. And so, in a sense, if you were the team support, you didn't need to think about your support slots individually. You thought about it as a team because everyone wants to drop their item on the ground for you to pick up and use on them, right? So this is a sort of a big nerf in that sense, where When it comes to the support category, we've lost a lot of potential resources. For grenades, for quick slots, though, quick slots we're not the most worried about. Somebody needs to run a toolkit at some point, right? Ideally. But for the most part, when it comes to the grenade slots, we've always, at least I have always played in a style where like you have extra grenade slots because that's the most powerful thing in the game. So this, in that sense, not a big deal. Sort of a big deal for medics though. So again, this is just sort of like annoying quality of life stuff. The loss of ammo capacity is also a little painful just because when it comes to using a card like On Your Mark, it gives you ammo relative to what your current maximum ammo capacity is. So this actually nerfs, like the amount of ammo we get from On Your Mark is also technically nerfed by 40%, but that number is much smaller because On Your Mark is only giving 10 your max, right? And things like that. But really the big takeaway here from this is that we get the bonus mementos in addition to the normal multiplier. So, if we were going to mid max, and keep in mind we are still going to talk about this chance for spawning broken items, but basically, an item that is being spawned into the mission can be turned into scrap, and picking up scrap gives you 1 copper. We're going to talk about that in a second here. But if we wanted to mid max, the amount of points that we could potentially earn, the least amount of our trouble, give ourselves the best chance to succeed, I have two recommendations here. One is this one right here. We leave difficulty empty, max Ridden, max Horde, max Player. Then you're going to find that this is actually relatively easy to play through. This right here is surprisingly easy. But we have 3 of the 4 categories maxed out. So what I like about this is that it's very easy to wrap your head around. You max these 3 things out. You deal with the issues that these 3 things, throw at us. But if it's too easy, you just crank up the difficulty a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit there. Sort of find where that wall is. Find where you go, oh crap, like this is actually really hard now. That'll be somewhere, in here as you crank up the difficulty. But this is a really simple way to just maximize your points and then sort of recognize, is this too easy? Is this too hard? You can crank up the difficulty or crank it down as you see fit. It's sort of a nice way to min-max your points and find exactly where that skill wall is for you or your team or playing with randoms and things like that. But this is actually surprisingly right here with the difficulty set to 0, relatively easy. So if you're sort of scared or if you're struggling, try this. Try this. This is a good place to start, I think, and start building up from. If you're looking to slowly increase your overall score over time. Now, if you're a little bit more of a gamer, if you want to mid-max your points even more, right? Because in this one right here, 31 is our multiplier. But here, instead, we got 41 as the multiplier. And this, overall, is more difficult because we're on the legendary mode. When it comes to playing in the trials with the different difficulties, there's really no difference between no hope mode and no hope mode in the trials. And so the same is sort of true of legendary. So this is the same as no hope mode, just enemies have more health, they deal more damage. This is just going to be like the same level of difficulty as no hope mode, plus some extra setbacks because of the legendary mode, the player setback, the horde size, and things like that. But we get an extra 10 more points of multiplier. And this right here, if you're this right here is doable in solo mode offline with the bots. This is absolutely doable with a coordinated team. And the same concept. Once you're comfortable with this is a great way to min max your points. Once you're comfortable, just increase the difficulty of the Ridden until you reach a point where you go, oh man, we're starting to die. This is too hard. You can play around with it. Just a really nice way to min max your points and then sort of wrap your head around. Is it too easy? Is it too hard? And then you adjust the Ridden difficulty as you see. Because really, when it comes to what ends up making the game more difficult in the trials is difficulty and Ridden. How much health do they have and how much damage do they have? These two things, right? These two modifiers have the most impact as far as how hard your trials is going to be. So it just comes down to which one do you want to leave empty and which one do you want to max out. I'll leave that, guys, up to you. Now, the other bit here we need to talk about are some nuances of trials. We got, let me look at my notes right here. Let me look at my notes. Oh, God, it's bright. Let me do this. There we go, full screen. It's bright. Right, some nuances that we got going on here, though, is at the start of each level. The start of each level, right, just like in... I can't handle it. I'm sorry. It's too bright. Get me out of full screen mode. We're going to go back to this. It's hurting my eyes. Those are my notes. At the start of each level, right? So there's an interesting interaction where at the start of each level, cards like Share the Wealth, cards like... my notes. Cards like Share the Wealth, cards like Fresh Bandage, cards that literally say at the start of each level, those cards do not trigger if you're going into a hive. They don't take effect. And that's true in normal campaigns. So that's also true in the trials. That's significant to note because in trials, you're only doing 4 missions. So if everybody on your team is running Share the Wealth, that's 1,600 copper per mission. But if you choose a hive as one of your missions, that's 1/4 of your potential income. That just doesn't happen. It disappears, it goes away. Whereas, like in a normal campaign, even though it doesn't trigger when you go into the hive, you still go into the next mission, right? You're not skipping a mission. So eventually, that Share the Wealth does eventually trigger. But here in Trials, it's lost forever. So keep that in mind with cards that say at the start of a level, if you choose a hive, those cards just don't happen. Now, scrap. This is the other interesting mechanic about trials. Like we said before, when it comes to items spawning as broken items, they are turned into scrap, and they are worth 1 copper. Money grubbers and lucky pennies do not interact with scrap. Does not count as copper as far as the game is concerned. So if you're picking up lots and lots of scrap, it is not giving you bonus stacks of money grubbers. And if you're picking up lots and lots of scrap, there is no chance that it's going to give you an additional 30% copper as far as I can tell. Unless it's happening like in the background, but I really didn't notice or pay, like I didn't when I picked up scrap and I looked at my overall copper gain, there was no like bonus 30% over the course of a mission as far as I can tell. Now, also too about this 40% chance to spawn broken items, this is huge because it affects Hoffman and it affects Pinata. If Hoffman is eliminating enemies and his chance to spawn ammo or even a throwable, which is one of the most powerful things in the game, makes him one of the best cleaners in the game. It's like the reason why you want to run Hoffman. He can spawn a grenade, and then it gets instantly turned into scrap. So this 40% chance, every time you spawn an item using Hoffman or using Pinata, there's a 40% chance that that item will be instantly turned into a broken item, into scrap, which is a huge nerf to Hoffman in general. In fact, to the point that I don't think you run Hoffman in trials if you're running max player, because 40% of the time, his stuff that he's generating is just getting basically deleted. Just basically getting deleted. And so that sort of brings us into some cards that are weaker or stronger. Keep in mind, we're not going super in depth here. Just some concepts to understand, right, as far as how we might be building our decks in trials. We've already talked about all 3 of these things in general, but there's cards that are weaker, right? All cards that say start with at the start of each level, because if you choose a hive, they don't trigger. Yada is weaker. Grenades are weaker just because more enemies have opportunity for explosive damage resistance and things like that. Not saying that you can't run these cards or these cards are bad. They're just weaker overall. Because what's interesting now is that if like a card like Pinata or another card too that's weaker, all of the scavenger cards, right? All of the scavenger cards now are weaker because 40% of that loot is now scrap instead of a med kit, right? So all of the cards that pertain to you looting items in the mission significantly weaker because of the scrap of the mechanic. And so like a card like Pinata is now weaker, and looting items that spawn in a mission is weaker A card like Magician's Apprentice, which is the reuse chance card, cards like that become more lucrative in a sense, right? That card is stronger, even though it's not buffed. That card, in comparison to the other resource generating cards, Magician's Apprentice becomes more viable because all of the other resource generating cards are weaker now, and so Magician's Apprentice, sort of by default, is a little bit stronger. You don't need to stop and loot because hopefully you'll get one or two triggers of Magician's Apprentice, and that's enough for you to get through the level. Things like that. Bonus ammo cards, very strong now, because if we want to run a card like On Your Mark, we want more ammo overall. With the sort of loss of opportunity for looting items or having more pockets and things like that, bullets become a far more viable way and for us to deal with the problems in the video game. Admin Reload is another really card. Admin Reload's always been a really good card in general, but now with like the bonus Horde event, or the Horde events being sort of more chaotic, more big, and enemies having more health and enemies having constant health regeneration, having the ability to constantly keep out yes without never having to stop to reload and things like that, really really important to your overall team. So admin reload basically just means that you get to stay in a fight for longer or consistently. So admin reload, I think, is to a degree like a must include card, because when it comes to admin reload, the harder the game gets, the more powerful admin reload becomes, because the more often you end up needing it. So admin reload gets better or stronger, so to speak, as the game gets more difficult. And then bonus team slots. We have -1 to all accessories. So all of a sudden, those cards that give your entire team a -1 slot, I think, sort of becomes more viable now, uh, as well as a way to potentially increase your team's overall capacity for things, with the least amount of cards possible. So, like one person running a team slot upgrade is sometimes all that you need to. You can at least carry that one tool, right? And things like that. So, overall, right? Overall, that is the modifiers here. Let me know if this was helpful or not. We are going to be going into some team composition videos and things like that for taking on the challenges of trials. Looking at this, we'll be playing through this with bots and cranking up the difficulty as we see fit, and trying to play with players and things like that. So, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it, and I will see you in the future.